Hey guys,
Hello, how are you?
I wanted to make a fun and more unique ranking video for all of you, and the one that I know a couple of you in the comments have wanted as well. Today, we are here to rank all of the killer walking animations. We are going to be specifically taking a look at the post-game walks that the characters do off on the right side of your screen, so we can get a full look of their model as they walk, instead of trying to mess with my Survivor's camera to try and record this footage for you all. We will be taking a look at all 41 killers, and we will be ranking them from worst to best. There will be 42 ranking numbers, however, because the Legion members have two different walking animations. Frank and Joey have the same, and Julie and Susie have the same. How we will actually rank all these walking animations will be as following. We will be taking a look at if the walk has any real personality to the character, which most, if not all of them actually do, but some killers have more attention to detail to their walk cycle, and that's the heavy hitter on what we'll be actually looking at, is the attention to detail that these killers were actually given. Surprisingly, this was a lot harder than I thought it would be to rank, because Behavior put a lot of detail into all of these killers' walk cycles, so characters with pretty decent walks might be towards the bottom because a lot of killers were done very nicely. So please let me know if you change anything in my list. By the way, come check out my Twitch and come join my Discord server if you're just looking to come hang out, chat, and meet some new awesome people. But without further ado, let's get right into the ranking, everybody. Starting off with the character that I think has the worst walking animation is, unfortunately, Trapper. And while I really don't think it's the worst one here, I think it just ends up being the most outdated out of them all. Compared to other characters, especially the early ones, Trapper just seems so stiff and has almost no personality to this walk cycle, especially after giving him all this lore in the tomes. Now, granted, he could be stiff because of all the hooks in his back, and that definitely makes sense, but I think they could have done something similar to Bestlinger, which we'll get into a little later, just to make it look like that's exactly what's happening to make him so stiff. No matter what though, Trapper needs a buff to not only his kit, but also his outdatedness. Pig, I do like the simplicity that this animation has, but I just wish there was a little more to it. Pig obviously doesn't have to do a lot since she is just a normal human, but unfortunately that's kind of why she's down this low, since we have literal monsters and creatures just roaming around as well. I still think it's better than Trapper's, but only by a little bit though. And I promise I don't have a vendetta against Trapper, it's more of a cry for help to get this man buffed. Myers I would love to put higher for his nonchalant walk, but I really think what would make this even better is that he just wouldn't have almost any walking animation at all and just basically stands completely still. Now I know some killers have just slightly different walking animations actually in-game compared to the post-game scoreboard, like Myers and Hag, and we'll see all those killers in just a moment, and I would really want almost no animation for him swinging his arms when walking, and barely any movements at all, like from his knees and legs, since they already made him lace up his kicks and start running, but I just wish this animation was just slightly tweaked. Freddy only has one real thing going on for him, and that's the fact that he sometimes decides to wiggle his claw hands while walking. It still makes that very satisfying noise, but that's really the only speciality that he has for him here with this specific animation. He's got the most basic walk like ever, so this one little detail puts him just barely above the rest. Bubba's walking cycle is just so cute in general, and I think it's just because it reminds me of a baby killer. I'm not 100% sure on why it does, but whenever I see a default Bubba running at me from across the map, I just can't help but think it's adorable. Does anyone else agree with me on this one? Definitely let me know, but unfortunately, I think it is pretty static. But then again, in the TCM game, there wasn't too much animation to him anyways, but he did rev his chainsaw above his head and slam it down, so I guess that's kind of an unfair comparison there, but still, I think this is a pretty appropriate place for him to be. Doctor is the first one on this list to have some real swinging animation going on here, and I think it just falls a little short, mainly because of his character. Other killers that we'll get into later have walk cycles that really fit them and their personality, and I would have just really wanted Doctor to have just a little more joltiness and more sporadic movements when he's walking, because of all that electricity that's actually flowing through him. I would love for him to be more jumpy, just like in his own lobby animation, but this is where he goes for now. Also, just quickly, I want to say say that I know they can't make a walking animation grandiose and epic, because then it would just get confusing for the Survivor players and mind games especially. Just like how it's hard to loop a spirit already because of her passive phasing. But if I make a suggestion for a killer, I just want it slightly tweaked a little bit. I don't want them hitting a boogie every time they walk. I just want a little smidge better. Julie walks kind of strangely. I'm pretty sure it's them being all careful and sneaky, but man, that posture is just the worst. I appreciate how floaty this animation is, and it does speak to Susie, but I think this animation could be tweaked a little more to speak more to Julie's character and her side of the story. Frank, unlike with Julie's animation, I think this one on both Frank and Joey really fit who they are or trying to be. And I think it's the best one of the two because it shows who all four of them want to be. These rough and tough people who have questionable morals, but still, I think this is the better one of the two here. Krasu, I am including only the human form and not the head form, but when we get to the spot where I think that form would be, I'm gonna give an honorable mention to it. But anyways, with this specific animation, I just wish there was slightly more. I do like this animation a lot, but maybe some swinging of the arm that's actually holding the weapon would make it just that much better here. Trickster, I think, is the better version of Krasu's walking animation, and kind of what I wanted for her as well. The loose kind of run that he has here is very effective to show the intent of this character, and I appreciate how jumpy he is, but there are characters that I think have a better run than this. Ghoul, I think, has just a slightly better run than Trickster did. And he's kind of cheating here because the Kagune on his back adds so much aura to him. Especially with this little light jog that he's got going on here. I think it's perfect to portray this character, but there are better killers that run that we'll get into very soon. Huntress, with exactly who her character is, I think it's perfect to capture what she's become as well. A hunter who's constantly on the prowl on her turf. There's barely any movement with the axe in the arms because she knows how to hold it effectively while running to get that perfect slice on you. And unlike Julie, I think the posture here, where she's constantly hunched forward, fits her perfectly. Twins, I don't really know how to put into words, but I think it's perfect for their character. Victor being completely static is slightly strange, but I think Charlotte swinging her arms at a low stance, plus the way she walks with basically no emotion in her face at all, is perfect for the character here. So I think this is a well-deserved high spot for them. Plague walks in a very sassy sachet, and for her being a priestess, it's exactly what her character should be, having a very elegant way of performing basically everything, especially in the walk. The sensor hanging from her arm all flaily like that adds to this animation, making this very pleasing to the eyes. Hag's animation in-game is slightly more aggressive and she leans in a bit more, but here I think out of all the walking cycles in the game, I think this one is the one that describes a character perfectly. It's always weird to think that Lisa Sherwood, the person who is Hag, is only like 18, and it really just goes to show how much she's been turned into a complete monster. The hobbling and the constant growling is perfect here. Pyramid Head has some serious gamer neck going on with his walk cycle, but to be fair, it makes sense because of how heavy that must be to constantly carry that massive weight upon your head. No matter how strong you are, Pyramid Head's neck will always be the strongest out of the bunch. And I think the nonchalant walk while carrying the huge sword behind him is just so funny too, so I think it definitely deserves this spot. Pinhead I originally had really low, but then I realized that the leather clothing would 100% heavily restrict his movements. So him not having a lot of movement here to begin with, I think definitely speaks to his character. Plus, just look at the man. He's not going to be able to have the same movement as someone like Hag. Deathslinger, out of all the characters with restricted movements, I think has the best walk. If you aren't aware, Deathslinger has a brace on his left leg, most likely due to a confrontation during his time in prison with the other inmates and the warden. So his walk is all janky, but he still puts it to great use. That added touch of detail just had to put him higher up on this list, even if there's not a lot going on to it. Hillbilly also having a limp is most likely due to his past with his parents, plus how exactly he was born, and unlike Deathslinger, he doesn't have a brace to help him out, so he's constantly all over the place. He also just probably can't handle himself too much because of his superhuman strength. If I were able to casually swing a chainsaw with one hand, I think the rest of my body would also be pretty crazy as well. So I think this animation works really well here. Also, I think this is where I'd put Crusoe's head format, but because we are just including the main killers and not their powers, it's an honorable mention. But let me know if I should do a walking animation for killer powers. That could be pretty fun. Wesker has one of the best yet equally goofiest run animations, but I mean, props to him because it's very effective, but also very bold because while running, he's swinging his knife very close to his face, where something could easily go wrong here. But just like Huntress, I think this posture fits him very well, since he's there for the thrill of the trials. One of the best actual running animations in the game for sure. Wraith, I think, has the best quote-unquote actual running animation in this game, and while I don't think it quite fits his character, I really like how this looks on him specifically, and I'm pretty sure his hand not holding the weapon is like that because the bell is constantly in that hand, but it's just invisible until you actually use the power. But I think it actually fits wonderfully here because it shows how much he's ready for something, and I think it deserves a spot at the top, especially for how early this character is. Blight through this animation shows that he's got just a slight bit of humanity left within him to hold his weapon constantly and walk so threateningly, but not enough to know what he's actually doing, if that makes sense. The weapon's constantly getting thrashed around, and he seems to have a small limp with his legs. I think this is a great animation that really shows what he's become. Clown walks with a true passion, and the fact that he's a pretty chunky boy, I just gotta give him props for moving so fast on his feet. But let's be honest, the only reason he's actually up this high is because he flips his knife like an absolute master, exactly like in his hit cooldown. But unlike that, we can actually see it while he's running, which it's just incredible on how he does it. I really like this animation, and I think it fits perfectly right here in the middle of all the rankings. Nemesis has probably one of the most intimidating walk cycles to him, since he's just a big bioweapon that won't stop until his goal has been reached or dead. Although I can't go without talking about the actual in-game running animation, which I'm sure we are all familiar with how goofy it really looks and how it's the tunneling stereotype manifested in physical form. But going back to the actual walking animation, the constant stomping, I like how menacing it makes him out to be, exactly like how his character should be portrayed. Oni, I think his walking animation is just slightly more intimidating than Nemesis, mainly due to the fact that if you first see both of them side by side, one is a big hulking man and the other is a big hulking man with a katana. Also the fact that he's constantly looking around and showing off that katana, like he just can't stand still and he's trying to mock and scare you, and for that I think he goes right here. Artist is kind of doing a sachet like Plague was, but I think this one just ends up being way better because of the amount of detail that they actually put into this character alone. Because she's basically turned into a crow, she puts her arms out in the back of her, and runs exactly like how a bird would fly. And with that small little added detail, I think it deserves a spot here. Skull Merchant has one of the sassiest walks and just personalities in the game, that the simplicity of this animation speaks volumes more than if she had anything more extravagant. A short and simple one that defines her perfectly. Houndmaster is exactly the same as Skull Merchant, basically, with her sassy walk, but while walking, she steps down harder, like she's on a mission and knows exactly what she's doing. The added touch of snug next to her is wonderful, so she's going to be just a little higher than Skull Merchant. Onryo just casually glitching in and out of existence adds so much to her character that the transition from the ring straight to DBD was done really well, and it shows right here with this animation. The constant glitching of her body and the fast joltiness of her limbs is exactly like the scene where she comes out of the TV, and for all the nods to the movie, I think it just has to go up high. Nurse was a hard one to put on the list because she cheats and is literally floating, so it's not fair to the other killers, which is why I'm going to talk about all of the floating killers right here, because after looking at all of them, I think they all fit around the same, with Nurse just being slightly worse, but it's still really cool looking with her literally dragging her feet behind her while she's floating, and I think it just looks amazing. Vecna is just slightly ahead of Nurse, and that's mainly because he seems like he's a master of the craft, and Nurse is just an amateur of the floating department. Plus, I think the fact his weapon is also floating adds so many points to him. Dracula, I think, is just slightly better than Vecna, because you can see his whole body more. I know that isn't quite a fair comparison since one of them is a literal skeleton, but if it were up to me, they'd be tied for a spot, since they have the same bobbing up and down animation to them. But the fact you get to see more of Dracula and that he's stood basically straight up puts him just slightly above the other floating characters. Ghostface definitely has the most fun in the trials, since I can see that smile through that mask while he's just charging at a survivor like this. That's exactly the person that Ghostface is, so I think this spot for him is very appropriate and also well deserved. Springtrap is next, and what I really like about this animation, even though he's pretty restricted in his walking like the killer's lower down, I appreciate how they made his suit move around like he's actually got weight to him. He's stomping really hard and the ears are constantly moving around, and because of that added detail, this is the spot he's gonna go in. Singularity, I've always loved what they've done for his animation because of how jumpy and all over the place he is, because he is a sentient AI that went completely rogue. And while he wants to have the perfect body and destroy humanity, you can see the imperfections because of the damage he's sustained, and because of the way that he doesn't seem to have any joints in his legs to the fullest ability. He doesn't really bend them, and that's why he's got the best limp walk in the game. Alien I like because of how unique this is. You partially see this in the trial, but the tail is always in the air, so crawling on all fours in the post game is really cool, and they could have just made them stand up and walk like they do in game already, but the attention to detail here adds so many points that they definitely deserve this spot 100%. Knight, like Xenomorph, is cheating a little bit because this specific animation you actually never see while he's in the trial and is very specific to the post-game scoreboard, but that's also why he's high up here, because they went out of their way to make a whole different animation and it's flawless. The constant running forward while he's got his sword out and on display is like a better version of Oni, where he was trying to flaunt it and Knight shows it just outright to you. Plus the way his strides look like he's jumping towards you, taking huge leaps, adds a lot to this animation. Chucky, just like Xeno and Knight, has a slightly altered walk cycle in the post game where he decides to sometimes flip the bird at you. And while you can see this in game through a hit animation, the addition to put this here on this specific animation to flip us off, the player, is an added detail that I have to give it credit for. Dredge deserves to be this high mainly because he's a thick black fog that learned to walk. But in all seriousness, Dredge drags himself across the ground so menacingly, and the way he's constantly moving side to side shows how eager he is to put an end to you. When getting in chase, he has a slightly more aggressive stance to him that definitely goes with what I was saying before, but because of how menacing this dude really is, I think this is perfect for him. Demo, I think, has the most intimidating walk here, and the one that is super unique because it puts part of his power into the walking animation as well. The actual walk he does is scary enough, but sometimes he just decides to show you what the dentist did to him during his visit and opens his mouth super wide for everyone to see. The fact he puts his arms out wider to show those long appendages and the very sharp claws adds a lot to this animation. Unknown will probably always have some of my favorite animations because you could tell how much love the devs had for this chapter altogether. He's already a creepy character by look, but sometimes he just decides to tweak out and randomly spasm everywhere for a little bit, which adds to the mystery of this character because of how janky and weird he is. The Unknown definitely needs to be this high. Spirit comes out as number 1 for this ranking, and I think just watching her move around will speak way more than I actually can. This animation is just amazing. Another character that excelled in the animation department, specifically with the facial features. The constant different emotions that she's displaying and fighting at the exact same time really shows here. Anger, guilt, sadness, grief, all of the above showing all at once. Not only that, but then she just randomly decides to reach out like she wants to give you a hug is horrifying. Such a well-made animation that deserves to be number 1. But this was a fun one to make. And to be fair, all the animation rankings are always fun, but they take a lot of time for me because I spend a lot of time analyzing these animations and making sure that my ranking and placements actually make sense. I made a post a little bit ago before Thanksgiving that I was gonna make a quick video, this video to be exact actually, that I was gonna make this exact video and it was just gonna be a quick video that I was gonna release before my big Mamba Jamba at the end of the year. And well, it's been a little more than 2 weeks. When it comes to these animation ones, it's just a personal gripe for me that I really need to look and analyze all these animations and make sure that my placements for them actually make sense for the final video. So that's why I can get a bit inconsistent with the upload schedule, because the next ranking video may take me a while because I'm really looking into all the details. So forgive me for that. Anyways, if you like this video, then I hope you consider subscribing. It would mean the world to me. If you would like to share any ideas for a video you'd like to see me cover, then drop it down below or join my Discord, and I have a specific forum right for you to share your ideas. I also have the same thing for any games you'd like to see me play on stream too. My Discord and Twitch will be linked in the description, and you'll always find the links on my homepage on YouTube. Thank you all so much for watching, and have a great rest of your day or night. Take care, y'all.